Hey, I just drew a broken chair. Nah, cue that one blues song. Anyways.
I literally was just thinking of that. That is what came into my mind. Broken down chair. You all
Yes.
should know that song if you don't figure it out.
Yes. Yes. It's one of the ones you're not allowed to not know. West Coast Swing. Hello and welcome to another zany episode of Nerdy West Coast Swing, the podcast with pixels where the anchors are out of this world and the points don't matter. We are here to help train your eyes so you can learn faster and dance better. I'm Cassie Winter.
I'm Alicia Marshall. If you're wondering who are we to be analyzing these pros, Cassie and I both have extensive training and experience in both partnered and solo dancing. Cassie has about 22 years, I've about 24. Before we get to our video tonight, we're going to be talking about balance. However, we had a question during the week from one of our viewers. And the question was, how do you increase your average connection? And we wanted to talk about that quickly before we get into the rest of the video, just so we don't forget.
Basically, the viewer has what they average out on a scale of 1 to 10. They think their connection's like a 6, and they were wondering how do you increase that number closer to a 10 or have power over how high the number goes. Connection, either tension or compression in West Coast Swing, is dependent on either positioning, pitch, or momentum, or some combination of those. But the psychological thing you need to get used to is having more weight in the connection. And I feel like what happens is you'll do the thing to increase the connection, but then suddenly it's more connection, and psychologically you're like, ah, and you rebound out of it, which is the opposite of what you want. So the first thing I would say is slowly, don't try to go from a 6 to a 10, go from a 6 to a 7 and then a 7 to an 8 and then yada, yada, yada. So that way you don't rebound out of the heavier connections, which then causes swing chaos. So that's my 2 cents. Alicia, you want to talk about the more specifics of how to increase it?
Basically, you want to think about, rather than if you're standing up straight, you have kind of your center right over the middle point of your feet. So you want to think about, rather than staying up over the middle part of your feet, you want to send your center back a little bit over maybe the heels or so. Really, it's going to be the further you send it back on the foot, the more pitch you're going to have backwards and the heavier the connection is going to be. So really it's just kind of where you're placing it. So rather than standing upright, kind of letting it hang back more. I will say some of that has to do with being relaxed. A lot of times people want to increase the connection, and that also affects the arm. And that's because it's you're trying to force connection rather than letting it be based on where you're at in terms of your center and just positioning of your body. You want to make sure that that is relaxed when you pitch back, because otherwise you're just going to be yanking on your partner, and that doesn't necessarily increase connection. It kind of does, but it also kind of screws it up. Mm-hmm. It makes it less malleable, and it makes it harder for your partner to understand what's going on just in general. So basically, the answer is, when you're standing up, think of pitching the hips back. Basically, it's going to be something that you can really practice with a partner only. And that's one of the very few things that is that way, because it is the weight of the connection. And you can do the door, fridge things, but I don't really feel like that's a really good representation of how it feels to settle back into the connection when you have somebody on the other end. It's a little bit different in my opinion. But I mean, you can also do it if you would like to just kind of practice where you're at in terms of your center over your foot. Mm-hmm. You can practice it a little bit, but I just don't think it's quite the same, and you'll kind of get a different feeling than when you have somebody on the other end. So yeah, that's just my opinion. And the other thing that I wanted to mention for follows specifically, because this was a lead question or a question from a lead, but for follows specifically, we're taught that you want to be kind of driving forward on your 1 at the end of the slot and at the end of your anchor. And what that does is it reduces the connection, and it doesn't allow you to follow as well, because you can't hang back and let your lead control where you're at, because you're up over your foot. So Like you're kind of up over the center, and that makes it so that you have full control. You want it to be so that if you were to release the connection, you would kind of fall back ever so slightly. I wanted to mention that for follow specifically, is that make sure that you're hanging back. Otherwise, even if you're trying to pitch back further, it's not going to change the connection in the way you want it to.
Because the 1 is a result of a prep, and the anchor is a prep. And a lot of people, when you're first learning West Coast swing, you learn the result of the prep first and therefore prioritize it, but you need to prep for it. If I were to launch a rubber band at you, it wouldn't work unless I stretched the rubber band first. And a lot of people are just trying to make it use the force when it's all limp and wiggly. You have to stretch it back first. You have to prep for your 1 on your anchor. And that comes from the pitch that Alicia was talking about.
Yep.
Additionally, for leaders, really getting good with delayed weight transfers and brace steps, which is a particular type of delayed weight transfer where you're actually bracing against the follow's weight and momentum. That combined with either shaping to one side or the other is a great way to shorten the rope in the connection to create tension, because you can only create tension once the rope is at max length, right? So if you take away length by positioning yourself or rotating yourself to a certain degree, that can make tension happen sooner and stronger. The more time you have to build tension, the heavier it can get. So posting is also really, really important as a leader. If you're not posting for your follow properly and you're just asking for tension around count 6 at the end of a 6 count pattern, there's not going to be enough time to build up more connection. And, or if you do suddenly apply a lot of tension right on count 6, that's going to give the follow whiplash. So lots of nuance there. Hopefully that helps at least start to answer your question. Erin, thank you so much for reaching out to us with it.
Yeah.
And tonight we are talking about balance. And we've got a video between Benji and Tatiana. Need I say more? From Desert City, was it 2019? Yes.
Oh, yeah, I think so.
I am dropping the video in the chat. Go ahead and give it a watch. And when you're done, we will get to analyzing. To the screen share. There are a number of things that are really important to consider when you're trying to learn how to improve your balance and master your balance. The first and foremost is that balance is not a state, it's a verb. It's something you do, because even if you're just trying to stand on one foot, you have to adjust sections of your body to compensate. So one of the things that we're going to be highlighting a lot tonight is the line of gravity, the vertical line through the body. It's over the center axis, and the mass of the body is equal on either side. So the body is counterbalanced. If this person were to pick up this foot and literally that's all they did, the only part of their body that would be in contact with the floor is the other foot, right? So that would actually become the line of gravity. However, as you can tell, the majority of the body mass is on this side. And therefore, if they picked up this foot and did nothing else, they would fall over in that direction, right? What needs to happen instead is you need to adjust your body over your standing foot or feet such that your mass is counterbalanced on either side of your center of gravity. So one of the simplest ways to do that is to shift your hips to the side so they're past the standing foot. So you would be more like this. And then this leg is bent back here or something. But you can see now, if we draw a vertical line from this standing foot, the body mass is now balanced on either side of that line. Things get complicated in partner dancing because you're not very static very often. It's quite rare. So you're also dealing with momentum. So momentum can add weight on either side of the center of gravity. And that's how you can get these weird, almost defying gravity positions. Cue song in your heads. Sorry, not sorry. where it looks like their body mass is not actually balanced on either side of the center of gravity, but it's because of the momentum on the side that has less mass that's actually countering the body weight on the other side. And then you add a partner into the mix, and it adds another layer of complexity because the partner can counterbalance you also, and your momentum and your weight. So there's a little crash course on balance. Hopefully it will now be easier for you to see. We're going to go ahead and start just framing through this whole dance. And as always, if you have any questions while we're going, don't hesitate to unmute yourself or type a question in the chat. So I wanted to talk about this very first moment because of how Benji is counterbalancing Tatiana, because you can see how she has the majority of her weight on her front foot, and she's able to slide her back foot away from her as her center is kind of moving with that back foot. Not as quickly or as much distance, but her center is moving away from Benji a little bit. And because of that, they hit max tension and she's able to rebound back a little bit when Benji invites her to. So this is an instance of them playing with counterbalance in a specific way that turns it into a prep and redirect. So kind of like what we were talking about earlier in answering our viewer's question. Once tension gets increased, it becomes a stretched rubber band that you can then release. And the resulting movement is a result of the prep. It's not generated out of thin air.
I'd like to add in what Benji is doing specifically. So at the beginning of it, you can see before Tot like slides back, Benji is standing, he's upright, but he has kind of a turnout in his feet. So that right foot specifically is kind of pointed diagonally outward. But when Tot starts going back, he actually lifts up the toe of that foot and rotates it forward so that it takes his like weight. It's not like settled kind of up over him. It's settling backwards now because having that foot, having the feet kind of parallel forward is going to help just drop the weight back.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than having your feet rotated open, which is going to kind of balance things a little bit more.
So this is one of those positions where if we look at Tot's standing foot and we were to draw a line straight up from it, like, her butt is like on this side of the line, but without Benji's help here, I think she would be teetering in that direction, like not like falling quickly or anything, but teetering. And I feel like that's something that gets lost in translation a lot. Like we talk about how if you just let go of the handhold when you're in an anchored position, you should fall back a little bit. But it's just that it's that little bit. Yeah. That should be your baseline, that you're depending on your partner for counterbalance a little bit. And that's the foundation of your technique. And then in more extreme circumstances or tricks or patterns, that's when you can increase the weight to be more and more and more dependent on your partner to counterbalance you. And this is one of those instances where they're using like the standard amount of counterbalance in West Coast swing to be in a more unique shape.
Yeah, so the reason that Tot can kind of pitch forward on that initially is because of the hook that Benji has around her upper arm.
And then we get some equal and opposite. So instead of her energy going this way, as it was before, it's now going this way, but still Benji is helping counterbalance that. Like her back is in his chest.
Mm-hmm. She also is, as her upper body is going kind of back, drawing that left foot forward to help balance her out. And it's not completely balanced, but bringing that foot back up under her is going to help a little bit, so that she's not just totally arching backward.
Yeah. And if she wanted to be in this position, I don't know why I emphasize that so much, but if she wanted to be fully independently balanced, all she would have to do is take her hips forward a little bit more and have a more smooth line through her legs and torso in order to counterbalance her center of gravity. But because she's partnered and Benji is there to support her, she doesn't have to do that. And you can even see that body roll that originates from her hips, that's because of how her balance was. She would have had to have, like, I don't know, reverse chest bumped him to get her chest to go first. So she actually does the reverse body roll as a playful way to get her center back over her feet.
Mm-hmm.
Body rolls, not just for fun anymore. Oh no. Advertiser voice is back. I'm so sorry. And so even though like Benji does that chest pop, it's he's not like, what is that? That's a belly button pop. That's what we'll call that. I don't think my lumbar spine could do that. Anyways, that's more of a call and response, him responding to her body roll. Like he wasn't doing that to lead her or support her in any way. That was just
Right.
It was a response to her call. English is hard for me today. I have no shame.
I actually just want to point out for a second, because I was just talking about follows driving that weight forward at the end of an anchor at the end of the slot. So you can see Tot is her weight is up over her toes and she doesn't send it back at all. So this would be kind of driving forward because her weight, her hips are like in front of the center of that back foot. Ideally, for her to hang back, she would want to have her hips back further past the point where it is currently, because you can even see like her upper body is quite forward, as is that right foot. So everything's kind of angling forward rather than hanging back.
Yeah. And I think that comes from she already had her left foot behind her. And you can already see how much Benji is pitching away from her. Mm-hmm. So there is a lot of tension. So even though like her arm is pretty extended, so she's at the end of her rope, but his is less extended, but it's still very close to the end of the rope. So this is like as far as her foot gets to go. Mm-hmm. If she had made the choice to step in front with her left foot, then she could have braced against it and gotten up and back over that foot for her anchor.
Yeah. And I don't mean that like what she did is bad in terms of what they're doing currently. I just wanted to point that out because I mentioned it earlier, and it does make sense in this context for her to do it the way she did.
Yeah. And I love that you brought it up and we can highlight it, because I think so many of the times we see these unique choices from the champions because they have earned the right to make those choices, right? But that's not necessarily what they want us doing in our Jack and Jills at this point in time. And it's not necessarily what your basic should be.
Right.
So yeah.
She like claws forward.
I know. I really appreciate her hand gestures throughout this whole dance.
Just adds a little something.
Yep. Ew. since we talked about telemarks a couple of weeks ago, I just want to highlight this really quickly. So Tot gets onto the rail with him, so you can see her right foot is getting in front of his left foot. And then she keeps rotating, and that allows Benji's right side to swing through at the same rate as his right foot. So that way he's actually in the center of the slot with his right foot at this point in time, and is able to really easily get past her if he so chose. But it's time to go to the audience. But still, that was it.
She looks mildly concerned about how close he got to her.
You are not a Westie follow until you have feared for your bubble.
True.
That's another thing that's really awkward as a tall follow, because if their head is at chest level, it's just like,
yeah,
it's unfortunate.
Yeah. That sounds problematic.
I went way too far.
I can't relate, but that sounds problematic.
You just, I don't know, you dissociate from the situation, essentially, is the only option. Yeah.
Fair, yeah.
Do you want to talk about balance through these really simple, like, I don't know, Westie Schnee turns?
Yeah. So basically, any type of turn that is very similar to what Tot's doing, where she is keeping her feet about the same width under her as she's rotating. What's happening is that balance-wise, she is finding the balance point over one foot, shifting the weight, finding the balance point over the next, shifting the weight, finding the balance point over that. And it's kind of that just in succession. Like, it's about finding the balance point based on the foot that you're on. And I will say that here especially, like, she is not driving these or anything. She is just allowing him to rotate her. And so that allows her to really focus on being balanced over the foot that's in contact with the floor.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to highlight something that you said, that there's a distinction between finding the balance and then shifting weight.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we were talking about with our slingshots and our telemarks. When you combine direction and rotation, you throw them in a blender, that's usually when bad things happen. So the more you can distinguish those actions from each other in time, the more control you'll have.
Yeah.
And then I want to highlight how Benji is really extending his arm to get over as far in front of her face as possible when she's turned away from him. He's not pulling her hand over the center of her head, which is another recipe for disaster.
Yeah. Can we go back to the beginning of it so I can talk through the shift that Tot's doing? So starting out here, you can see that she's finding the balance point over that left foot and then rotating. It's only partially because of the way that she's going into it, but you can see she's balanced as that left foot rotates around. Then she plants the left foot, switches her weight. Her hips are now balanced over that foot, and then the right foot releases and it drags around. And then she places that foot, switches, releases the left, and it drags around. And you can just kind of see that that's the pattern that she's doing. So you want to make sure that you are being clear about making sure that there is a step and then a rotation, and then a step and then a rotation.
And it's only,
we don't want it all
180 rotation.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's not any past that. The only reason that it would be different is if you were like being led like in a weirdly accelerated turn or something like that.
Yeah, or if you're being, because like right here, she's not quite going in a straight line. She's going in a slight like curved line. the curved line is when you get like 190-degree
Mm-hmm.
rotations, but it's not that much larger than 180.
Yeah. I also wanted to point out that she is keeping her hips at the same height that whole time. She's not like drastically tipping from one to the other. Keeping it pretty even helps make that rotation and switch really smooth and really fast.
Mm-hmm. And this is one of those instances where the momentum is really important, because you're not simply counterbalancing your own weight statically in space when you're rotating. You're also dealing with your momentum, not only down the slot, but angularly from a bird's eye view because you're spinning.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's hard to see, because she's spinning away from us in the camera, but her steps are out ahead of her just a little bit when they touch the floor. And then when she shifts her weight onto them, because they're out ahead of her just ever so slightly, it allows her to slow herself down, so that way she can rotate solely on that foot
Mm-hmm.
and then change.
Right. And the reason that her free foot is moving slightly ahead of her is because of the way that she is holding her feet. She's keeping them in place. And so they're kind of just rotating around, but they're not like directly up underneath her.
Mm-hmm. Like, let's see, I think, yeah, it's more clear in this one, because you can see how it looks like there's more mass on this side, but because she is rotating this way, that momentum is countering that extra mass.
Mm-hmm.
Science.
And really, she's not picking up that free foot off the floor. It's just slightly in contact. It drags around for the most part, because then there's not a drastic change in terms of switching that weight from foot to foot.
Mm-hmm. All right, that was a satisfying deep dive. Are you ready to move on, or is there
Yeah.
more you want to add? Okay, cool.
No, I'm good.
Yeah, that was satisfying. All right, and just because I'm a stickler for this, I love again how Benji is really extending his arm to get to the other side of her torso so she can fit under that. All right, here is an instance of shared balance.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to highlight how there are a couple things going on. First of all, Tatiana has the intent to do this kind of like backward lunge towards the judges. And her head is even turned in that direction. And where your head weight is, because the head is the heaviest part of your body, that's like an independent thing. And when it's on top, where your head is and where it's pointing and where it is on either side of your center of gravity, you will go in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
So she has the intention to do this lunge. Benji notices that he's already got like a really secure connection with her up under her shoulder. And you can see with his right foot, oh, I was a little ahead of it. There it is. So he moves his right foot forward just a little bit to be on the correct opposite side of her left foot.
Right.
So that way we have the line of gravity, and we've got her foot over here, and we've got his foot over here. In the two-dimensional plane of that balance, they're on the opposite side of their shared center right through here.
Yeah.
If he had left his foot here and just lunged in that direction, that would have been a problem, because from a bird's eye view, he's going in this direction and she's going in that direction, and that won't work. So he puts his foot here, so that way they're actually in opposition linearly for each other.
Yep. I also want to point out that the reason that they have a shared middle point is because of where her foot is placed. So her foot is placed like right between his, so kind of where the center of his body is. So she's moving away from the center of his body. So he also needs to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And she's extending back and down. So he's countering her like side and up.
Yeah.
I say side because of the way that he's angled towards her. So like she has her back to the judges and she's dropping that leg back. But he's sideways, he's angled. So he's going to his side.
Yep. Because there's this like downward energy here. So I can't draw away from us in space because I've got a 2D monitor, you know? But this is one seamless line from this perspective.
Yeah.
I'm clicking. I'm still clicking. Oh yeah, I guess we have to talk about this too. All right, I've got a bookmark at the beginning. So now that they've reached a point of stability because Tot has brought her free foot back towards her a little bit, their shared mass can be closer to the center of gravity because of that, which allows him to be closer to her and to actually stand up onto his left foot because that's where the shared center of gravity is. It's like shared right through here between her right foot and his left foot. So he is able to pick up his right foot and appear to defy gravity because she is actually counterbalancing him at this point in time. But his like upper body and seat are intending towards us in the camera.
Yeah.
If they were to move towards her at all, they would crash.
Pretty much.
Yeah. And then at this point, now that he is in, plie position, he is a much more stable counterbalance for her. And that's when she's able to like monkey bar between his legs because she can 100% depend on him if she so chooses. And you can see how he did that like micro adjustment with his foot. And that's to make sure that both of his feet are perfectly counterbalanced on either side of where her weight is dropping down. And because her torso is in front of him, he brought his right foot forward a little bit to counter that.
It's a really strange angle to look at this from.
Yeah. And in slow motion, it's a lot of information.
So I wanted to actually point out something quickly. Because she is moving, she's extending her feet and then she has to come up on top of him. So that's quite a ways for her to move. So she has that right hand hooked up like on his back, behind his shoulder, on his shoulder, whatever. And she takes it from using that to that hook that's on his leg. Because that allows her to have more room to shift forward.
And down again, because her knees are bionic, apparently. So this is one of those situations where they're using the momentum of her going down with her torso and swinging from the right side of her body closer to her right foot to having her weight closer to her left foot. Like she's literally swinging towards his right calf. They're using that momentum as weight to counterbalance. And that's how he's able to get up over his right foot and arabesque. Well, I don't know what we're going to call what she's doing. She's doing like the reverse Neo. I should totally be a West Coast swing announcer if we had those. Yes, someone hire me. Okay. but it works because it's not static. If he were to try to do that arabesque independent of her swinging momentum, he would do it very differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is one of those moments where you kind of have to go down to come up.
Yeah.
I would just like to say, like, every dance between these two is just a bunch of nearly dying. Yeah.
Right.
I am always afraid for my life watching them, and I'm not involved in this at all.
Yeah. I have decided this styling that she does with this foot is just to stretch out the front of that knee. That's my headcanon. Like, I would love to have knees that strong.
So, because we were talking about earlier when she was kind of driving forward, this is a good example of her hanging back. So you can see that as she is kind of rotating around, the majority of that weight is back kind of in that heel of the standing foot, and her hip is back past it. So that's like the way that she is hanging back. And then as he's bringing her forward, she's not driving forward in terms of like, she's not moving her hips really far forward. She's kind of leaving them back as she extends that free foot.
Yeah, she's coming forward at the exact rate that his hips are moving backwards away from her.
Anyways, I just wanted to point that out because I pointed out the other example earlier.
This is how you would actually like break her arm if he didn't let go of her left hand. Bad things would happen.
Yeah.
So again, here, this is one of those positions like for Tot where she is ever so slightly depending on him, just a tiny bit.
Right.
And that's what allows her to have more connection and proprioception through that connection.
Yeah.
So she knows what kind of range of motion she has to play with from there. And I think for those of you who aren't familiar with the idea of proprioception, it's the body's sense of where your body parts are in space. So for example, if you were to close your eyes right now and I ask you, where is your right knee? You would be able to physically feel into it and kind of map out in three-dimensional space where your knee is in relationship to the rest of your body and the environment around you.
Yeah.
That is a really important part of balance. And what's cool about West Coast Swing Connection is when it's done well, it's not simply a way of prepping and releasing force. It's a way of providing proprioceptive information to both partners so they have a better understanding of where they are in space and relationship to each other and can play with it more freely.
Right. Proprioception for West Coast Swing is really about the relation to your partner and to the floor.
And if it's a social floor, the other partner's ships around you.
Yes.
I actually learned something really interesting about proprioception the other day in an article, because there's like a lot of things biologically that go into that. But if you're something that tends to run into things, it's because part of our proprioceptive engine is we want to be close to things for that proprioceptive information. So if you think about that coffee table in the center of your parents' giant living room, there's lots of space around it. Why do you hug it every time and bash your shin? It's because as humans, we tend to move and be closer to things than walking through a great big open space, because that proximity helps with our proprioception and balance. So yeah, I thought that was really interesting. Now here's a moment of slightly more than a little bit of dependence, but not so much. Like she would fall, but she would fall in slow motion.
Yeah. Like
they were gonna let
she could
go.
probably catch herself.
Yeah. Her arms would have enough time to swing back behind her and catch her if she so chose.
Yeah. But we're also gradually going into this position, which is something that's really important when it comes to balancing and counterbalancing, is to gradually move into something rather than just like dropping into something. It's a lot harder to like calculate how much needs to be on each side, and just like the weight. It's a lot harder to calculate when it just happens.
Yeah.
It kind of needs to, even if you're doing it quickly, it needs to be a gradual like increase. It can't just be all of a sudden.
Yeah. I'm suddenly thinking of figure skaters who, do the jumps, the jumps with the spins. And that's one of those like, I'm really glad I got too tall for figure skating really early in life. I was meant to be a dancer. Having my ankle locked inside a figure skating boot was so claustrophobic.
Yeah. No. No, thanks.
No, not doing that. It's actually funny. So my grandma was a roller skater, and then my mom was a figure skater. And I'm like, why y'all want to move so fast? I like dancing on solid ground. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Bye.
Oh dear. So this is a really interesting point because of the way that they are kind of balancing into it. So we have this little drop here, and then he moves her forward.
It looks like Riverdance a little bit, the way she's kicking her foot out ahead of her. I'm here for it.
So he's like countering her, coming into him. So then we're getting into this like triangle position with those feet out behind them, and then their heads are really close together. So because of the compression, they're kind of bracing inwards quite a bit more because of the way that they're like really dropped into it. It's a very strange position to be in, quite honestly.
Yeah, it's really unique because you not only have Tot's momentum going that way, but it's going up and then down. So Benji is having to counter forces in two directions, and that's why he's in this position. Hey, I just drew a broken chair. Nah, cue that one blues song. Anyways,
I literally was just thinking about that as what came into my mind. Broken down chair. You all should know that song if you don't figure it out.
Yes. It's one of the ones you're not allowed to not know. West Coast Swing.
So actually, I want to point out here that because she's compressing into him, there's that line that's basically like going from her hand down to his foot.
All right, we've been going a while now. I am kind of inclined to hold forward. Oh wait, no, this is a good thing to talk about. I just want to make sure we're talking about all of like the big balance moments in this dance.
Yeah.
So going into this mutual squat, is that what we're going to call it? You can see how
dropping to the floor together.
Dropping to the floor together. That's too many syllables for me. You should know that. Benji is doing a brace step. So he sent his left foot out ahead of his body in order to start countering Tatiana's momentum and weight down the slot. So that way she stops progressing. And then he starts squatting and she's like, okay, I guess we're squatting now. And you can see how he is not taking his head back over his hips, because if he were to do that, because of how extended she is, she would come toppling towards him. So he's making sure to maintain as stable a center counterpoint with the handhold as possible. And then that allows her to get the message without being yeeted into his face. And then this part is just basically friend choreography. It's the thing you do together. I don't think you can lead that.
Is it? I think it's the thing that they do together.
I mean, yeah, you being the proverbial champ buddies kind of situation. I mean, I know me and Rosie Thor have a couple of signature patterns and nobody else does, kind of thing. Anyways, what I'm saying is you don't necessarily lead this part. The actual lead follow comes at this moment where they have to get back up from that position. They have to have a center counterpoint so the hands aren't traveling either towards or away either of them. Their center of balance needs to be really close to each other, and that's why they're kind of like on top of each other with their toes. And then this is one of those instances where it's actually kind of important to really engage your arms and like row backwards, because you have to counterbalance your partner's full body weight. And the person who is smaller in mass needs to apply a lot more force than they're probably aware that they should. As a large person, whenever somebody tries to do this with me, I'm like, you feel like a feather. Ken has more. Like, I blink at you and I'd support your weight. Come on. So that's why I don't know, they're both very comparable bodies, but you can see how Tot's like really sitting into it a lot more. Because, and you can see how the hand holder's more over her knee, and that's because she has slightly less mass to counterbalance him. And that's how they're able to get up. If it was 100% perfectly shared, or it was on Benji's side, that would have been unbalanced.
Yeah, and the way that she is a little bit further down and her hips are a little bit more dropped, that's giving that extra weight to counterbalance him. You can see he's up a little bit higher.
Yeah, and it's hard to see because like the black, but her arms are bent here. She's really tucking her elbows to her rib cage to bring her mass all into one place to make it heavier. So kind of like how when you're spinning, if you bring your arms in, you increase your speed because your mass is localized instead of spread out.
Basically, she's just trying to drop all of her weight back and down as much as she can to add extra weight to the connection to counter him.
All right, here we go. Let's talk about, because I enjoy the shape. Well, first of all, let's talk about Benji's strafing, because that's kind of fun. So Benji is going down line and across the slot and kind of like a U-turn thing. And he's doing that so quickly. That's why his feet get out ahead of him. He's having to brace against his own momentum. If he did not have any momentum through there, he would have slow motion fell at Tatiana. Again, it's a slow motion thing because it's like there's nuance to how much counterbalance there is. It's not always go big or go home. And if you let go, you will be a heap of jello on the floor. That's not, it's very rare that that's what's going on. That's like the showcase lifts.
I don't think I've ever thought of balance as go big or go home, but sure.
You know what I mean, though, right? It makes sense.
I do.
Okay, cool. But what I'm saying is, like, that's very rare. More often than not, it's just very, very slight manipulations of balance and momentum.
Yeah, it's kind of like what I was talking about earlier, where you don't want to just like drop into something. It needs to be gradual.
Yeah. All right, so Tot is a master of one-footed turns in unique shapes.
Yeah.
And that's because she practices. And I remember taking a workshop once from her where she would attempt to fall over and then catch yourself. Like that's one of the ways she would practice.
Yeah.
Is intentionally throw off her balance and try to save herself before dying. Which, you know, if you have a resilient body, go for it. Make sure there are padded surfaces nearby. I think she would practice in her bedroom, if I remember correctly, was the story. But like we talked about at the beginning of tonight, balance is a verb. It's something you do. You're having to make micro adjustments as you go to make sure your mass and momentum are properly counterbalanced across your center of gravity. And so there are a number of things that she's doing in this shape. So if we look at it from this position, you can see how her body mass is evenly divided across that line. And now if you look here, it's very similar. She's helping counterbalance by throwing this hand back. So it's a balanced shape in 3 dimensions, not just 2.
Right. That hand is going back because her foot is going forward.
Yeah. And then she sits into it more and sends her foot even further back so that way her left arm can go forward.
Such an intense face.
Yes.
Which, I mean, is fair. This isn't easy.
Right? Oh my God. I can't imagine how twitchy my quad would be holding my leg like that. I appreciate how Benji then goes to offer just a little bit of extra. This is a proprioceptive thing. So he is there to offer extra support if she needs it. But until such a time, that's more proprioceptive information. So it's like gentle compression on her arm. So that way she has more information about where her whole body is in space relative to the dance floor and relative to Benji.
And because of how far kind of forward she's leaning, she's really dropping into that knee in order to counter it more. Like the more you drop into that knee, the more room you're going to have to move around and adjust things.
Yeah.
If you're more upright, it's really hard to adjust.
And then from this angle, you can see. But wait, there's more. Yeah, my quads are exhausted just thinking about this. But again, we already have a slightly different shape. Now she's leaning back and projecting her right foot forward.
Yeah, as he kind of moves her hand up over her head because it's kind of going back behind her. So that foot is coming out forward. So you can see he's kind of bringing her arm back. So she has that foot out forward to help balance that. And now as she comes around here, because she is kind of opening up with the upper body a little bit more than the lower body. So she's countering in terms of like, you can see she kind of moves that left arm.
And she's really pitching back away from Benji.
Right. So yeah, you can see as she comes around here, because her arm is opening up, she has that leg out forward. And so the arm, that free arm, kind of comes out and around. To keep it balanced.
Yeah. And then I really appreciate how Benji waits for her to finish squaring up to him before inviting her to sink into the connection even more.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be really hard for her because of the fact that she's on one foot to go from a rotational to dropping just away.
Yeah, because what they're trying to do here is a very linear pattern, and if he had tried to lead that when she was like here, there would have still been rotational energy to resolve.
Yeah.
And she would have swung and taken him out.
Yeah. So as she's coming forward towards the audience, Benji's moving away from them. He's coming back towards us, towards the camera.
Mm-hmm.
So we're keeping things equal the whole time.
Yep.
It would be a lot more like acceleration and just a lot harder for Tot in general if he were to just like swing her past him.
Yep. And it would be much harder to like actually not fall over as Benji on the other end of that.
Right.
Because it would put a lot of strain on his left side. And his mass would want to go forward and death would ensue.
And the other thing that happens is that as she swings down right past him, he kind of comes up a little bit to give her more space.
And it also helps counter the downward energy that she has. So he's going up as she's going down.
Yeah.
And he's going to the left while she's going forward away from him. And then the other thing that stepping towards us in the camera allows Benji to do is then step forward onto his right foot to make sure that like he is behind her.
Yeah.
Instead of still to the side of her for this rotation of hers.
That would end poorly.
Yes. Like there are so many ways both of these people could get like severely injured in this dance.
Yeah.
And it's like, yes, you did not die. Excellent. Well done.
It's that relief you feel at the end of the dance.
It's like, oh, they're safe. Yes. The fact that she's still able to bend her knees this much this far into the... We're only halfway through this video, people.
I know. And it's also like 8:10.
I know. We should probably stop. So here, I'm going to hold forward and see if there's maybe like one more thing we could talk about.
Yeah.
Oh,
well.
If we had time, I would talk about that passing sugar push because I really like it.
It is nice. Yeah.
Also, I just love Tot's choice right here, where she's like, "Okay, I need a break, so we're gonna do a slow claw at the audience here." I 10,000% appreciate that choice.
I do want to note, I really don't like that he grabs the back of her neck like that.
Yeah, that's something.
Just because it can be very restricting, and it can be dangerous if something happens like while he has a hold of her neck. But because it's the two of them and they've danced together so much, like that's fine. But if it were somebody that you don't dance with very much, I don't like that choice.
Yeah, because they hopefully have pre-existing consent for this, but you don't do this with someone you don't have that level of like partnership intimacy with. It can be really dangerous, like Alicia said, and that also goes not necessarily for like pattern or connection things, but overtly sexual kind of behavior. Like consent is important.
Yeah,
I'll just leave that there.
Yeah. The main reason that I don't like it in this dance is just because there's people that will see it and be like, oh, that's fine to do.
Yeah. I remember I was once taking a workshop from Jordan and Tot where they were teaching their signature kind of, Jordan puts his hand over the top of her shoulder, and then it has this illusion like he's throttling her back and forth while she tips her head back forward, and kind of ends up on the other side of his hand. So his hand's now on the opposite shoulder.
Yeah.
And that's an illusion pattern. There is no actual throttling.
Yeah.
But all the leaders I rotated to were throttling me. And I had already been in 2 bad car wrecks at that point. Like I have cervical instability in my neck, and I had to stop participating in that workshop because leaders didn't understand how, like, no, that's how you hurt someone really severely and really quickly. So consent, and also understanding when things are an illusion. Thank you very much.
Yes.
So an interesting thing is happening here, because it isn't necessarily that either neither of them did anything wrong. It's just that, like, she's behind him, so he couldn't see that her weight wasn't necessarily in the ideal place yet,
right,
for that lead. So the timing and positioning was a little funky. Like, he didn't necessarily know that she was hooking behind there. And it's because she's hooking behind that it has just like a slight awkwardness to it.
Right, because she has to kind of switch the weight and release that toe to keep rotating.
Yeah, because it looks like he really wants to, like, pull and drive the right side forward and around. But she's just simply not in a position to be able to do that really easily. So she's resisting it, slowing it down. And he gets the memo, and he doesn't try to, like, keep forcing it at 120 miles per hour like he started. Like, he gets the memo and he chills. But still, there was enough energy that Tot had to compensate a little bit. Like, she fell back onto her left heel. And you can see her hips come forward to compensate this body weight coming back, and this body weight coming back. Her hips went forward to compensate.
Right, because you can see he's kind of releasing down at an angle, which is why she's ending up kind of at this angle, because it's making her go kind of backward.
And I really appreciate how she just, like, accepts it. It's like that yes and improv thing I talk about all the time. She lets her body go into that shape, and she turns her head to her left shoulder and tilts her arms. So it looks very purposeful, even though it was a compensation.
Yeah.
And then, just as a side note for this, like, he really has his right hand all the way around to the other side of her waist, so she can lean forward against his forearm.
Yeah.
And hopefully his forearm is against her ribs and not her open abdominal cavity. Because you can apply pressure to ribs, you can't apply pressure to organs, just not very nice. Like I have said 5 million times on this show already.
Yep.
But I will not stop saying it till everybody understands. Oh, is this the part where she jumps and he wasn't quite ready? Is this the caca?
I think so.
Caca!
And toe touch.
And safe. So you can see how Benji's really sending his left arm, like, up and away to the back to help compensate, because so much of his body mass is forward of his own hips. And he's also having to compensate for Tot. So that arm is helping counterbalance the partnership. But they are still very heavily weighted forward of his hips. So he does, like, a hamstring lift while she jumps to help compensate and to hold her up. And yeah, because we all know he works out a lot, he was able to do that hopefully in a way that protected his lower back. And he was really using his glutes and hamstrings to stand up instead of trying to pull with his back. That would have been bad.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can see that because his back stays pretty straight as he comes up.
I went too far again. And safe. All right, I think that's a good place to call it for the night. Any questions, comments,
Oh,
concerns, withheld screams?
concerns.
Yeah, that's like I do really enjoy watching them for that incredibly like drop of a hat ability to counterbalance not only internally themselves
Yeah.
but across the partnership, and those micro adjustments, like when Benji would move his foot like half a step just to compensate properly for the partnership's center of mass, like and learning to be able to feel for that and to understand how the center of gravity isn't just two-dimensional, it's three-dimensional. And whenever a force is going one direction, there needs to be an equal and opposite out the other direction, regardless of what angle through space it is. And when you're a human body, there's more than one limb. So there's often like something this way, something this way, something this way. And being able to sense that both internally, but also then across the connection is really an important skill to work on building in your dancing.
The amount of times that they switch between like having to balance themselves versus having to balance the partnership, it goes back and forth very, very quickly, but it flows really nicely. And it's just because they have such a good sense of like where they need to be in order to stay up.
Yep. In order to not end up a puddle on the floor.
Yeah. Anyways.
Yep. Yeah.
That's balance.
The masterclass.
Yeah.
That's balance on expert level.
It really is. It really is.
We are going to be taking 2 weeks off, and on January 24th, Miles Monroe will be joining us to discuss the difference between first and second place in a Champions Jack and Jill.
What date did you say?
The 24th. Oh, I said January, didn't I?
Yeah.
June 24th. Really looking forward to that.
Very much so.
Thanks, everybody.
Yep. Thanks for joining. Bye.
And it's never on the recording. So you just see us all being like at the beginning of the recording, and there's no explanation. It's fantastic.
Cringing.
Is a great. I'm doing great tonight. I feel like I need a chiropractic adjustment after watching that each time.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
I always need a chiropractic adjustment, but I like really feel it. Do the screen share.
Oh, very deep.
It's a deep register tonight. All right, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Can you sense drama?
Yes.
that I was not sitting on that. That came to me miraculously, and I'm very pleased with that.
That was a very appropriate comment. So
yeah, thank you very much. I think this is another one of those 60 frames per second videos. So my fingers going as fast as I can.
Get a nice finger work out there.
Yeah. As a tall follow, I am always terrified to do this stuff. I'm like, I will kill them. Side note. Oh God, I just thought of the worst trolling idea for the champ leaders who get monkey barred through the legs all the time. They have a patch of Ewan McGregor, Obi-Wan Kenobi, like hidden in the crotch of their pants with the words "hello there."
Andrew said Ben McHenry.
Yes. All right, someone in the replay tag him in the comments or something. I don't know. But yes, make that happen. Was that the correct hand?
Other way.
Yeah,
that angled one.
Damn it. I keep conflating this hand with the person's face behind, so I was like, can you even see the hand? There's no meaningful difference. Yeah, I see it now. For those of you who don't know, I'm very blind, so never put on my glasses and then do a hair flip like Delancey von Langendorfer did once. She like fell over afterwards. It was glorious. I like ran to her side. It's like, don't let Delancey fall over. Anyways. Now I'm imagining like post-apocalypse, who would survive in the zombie world. I'm imagining just like Benji and Tot just doing crazy patterns to take out like a whole horde in 30 seconds. It started with a J.
It's close. It's fine.
I apparently have problems with J words. Jess, Jen, January, June.
We've learned something new.
Apparently it was the J letter in the alphabet that got bonked with my concussion back in 2011. That's the new headcanon. Pun not intended. Anyways. We should stop because the bad jokes keep coming. Yes.